The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling is a podcast by the Free Press in which Rowling is interviewed and confronted with her transphobic comments. Even ContraPoints is part of it. She is a YouTuber who is trans herself and has made one of the biggest videos on the subject.
Being cancelled. It sounds incredibly whiny and self-absorbed.
The podcast pulls the conflict into context and examines it from many angles to show that
you could not have misunderstood me more profoundly.
At least that's what the Free Press wants you to think. In reality, this podcast is a highly manipulative piece that uses propaganda techniques to try to gaslight you and turn the tables so that it no longer points to J.K. Rowling, but instead at the real culprits. But who are they?
Tumblr genders.
Internet.
The alt-right. 4chan. Fundamentalist Christians.
People in bathrooms.
So let's find out. But who actually produced all of this? Who is the Free Press?
The Free Press is a new kind of media company trying to help restore trust in journalism at a time when that trust is at a historic all-time low.
Trust me, bro, we're the good guys. So who are your confidential journalists? This is Megan Phelps Roper, who visited JK at her castle in Scotland to interview her.
I decided to write her a letter, and to my surprise, I heard back.
This is also Megan Phelps Roper.
My name is Megan.
She used to be in the fundamentalist Westboro Baptist Church.
We had signs that said things like, "Thank God for dead soldiers," and "Pray for more dead kids."
And she managed, thanks to the empathy of people on Twitter and patience, to see that she was wrong.
It was conversations on Twitter that helped me leave what many describe as a religious cult.
Well, doesn't that make her the perfect person to confront J.K. Rowling with her hurtful views? Well, yeah, one would immediately say, and that's probably what ContraPoint must have thought too, which is why she agreed to be part of the project. But she immediately regretted it when she found out the title of the podcast a few weeks later. The podcast is titled The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, an obviously tendentious framing that presents J.K.R. as the victim of an irrational hate mob. The fact that she was being instrumentalized by Megan in order to push a predetermined narrative became clear to her too late. But what kind of narrative? I mean, nobody can argue away what JKR said about trans people, right? Because, Joanne, we got the receipts! It's simple. You don't change the facts, you just change the meaning of words and contexts and leave things out, while giving others exaggerated attention. This is called framing. And if it were an Olympic sport, our Megan would have won triple gold. Yes, J.K. Rowling is a TERF.
So turfism is it's a hate movement that disguises transphobia as feminism.
But TERF doesn't mean trans exclusionary radical feminist, it means...
Feminists were hugely disparaged across the mainstream. They were ugly, they didn't shave their armpits, they were aggressive, they were butch. And I suppose I see real parallels with now, with the slur that is TERF. All the same tropes about a woman not behaving the way a woman is supposed to behave.
These are just normal feminists who are being bullied and silenced by that term. But trans activists, on the other hand, what do they sound like?
Fuck you, you ugly piece of shit!
I want her to choke on my fat trans dick.
How about slowly and horrendously murder TERFs in Saw-like torture machines?
Very sexualized abuse.
Many of the feminists labeled as TERFs have been attacked and received death threats.
It's presented as if there were a superior aggressor, namely trans people, especially trans women, who are repeatedly portrayed as violent, sexualizing men in disguise, and, well, on the other hand, concerned and vulnerable feminists and women who fear for their own safety and the safety of their children.
I believe feminists have tried very hard to have this discussion. How do we ensure everyone's rights and safety? But at the moment, there seems to be a very black and white view on the other side of the argument. It's everything or nothing.
I'm not kidding. In over 7 hours of podcast, we don't hear a single analogous example of aggressive TERFs, even though they are by no means difficult to find.
You know I'm a TERF, right? You're a boy, right? Don't with me, because honestly, I hit hard.
I'd like to see you try.
The big lie was first described by Adolf Hitler in Mein Kampf. And what is the big lie? The big lie is trans women are...
She says she was attacked by a group of women and tried to defend herself. The bouncers moved in, threw Courtney to the ground, and let the women who attacked her go.
And what is the dispute about? I assume that trans people have always existed, but they're such a small percentage that they never had a voice. But now, thanks to the internet, they can connect better and fight for their rights.
They really embraced this idea of genderqueer, which is, a word that was used before non-binary. Transgender.
You know, even the idea of being cis as opposed to being trans, phrases that were popularized on Tumblr.
Okay, sure, so Tumblr invented trans people. And clown and dragon people.
People who said that although they looked like they were human, they were actually wolves or dragons.
This is where you get people who say things like, my gender is a cloud.
The other big group that was on Tumblr were masturbators.
A lot of like fetishists and pornographers and sex workers. And you also have a lot of teenagers who are exploring their sexuality and they're drawing erotic fan art, or they're even posting photos of themselves.
Years later, Tumblr would be singled out by law enforcement for being a major source of child pornography online.
Okay, so a platform for perverts with child porno content,
A child.
So you know what kind of people are on there. Do you get what I mean by framing now? In Megan's narrative, queer left-wing women from Tumblr are just so irrationally aggressive because they're fighting with the extreme right-wing men from 4chan.
You have this kind of reinforcing culture of ultra-sensitivity on one side, and this reinforcing culture of anti-sensitivity on the other side.
And in the middle is poor, completely normal J.K. Rowling on her completely normal Twitter who just wants to say that women don't have penises! I mean, come on, you can still say that, right? The fact that Twitter has the same issue with child porno is never mentioned because framing. Otherwise, J.K. Rowling wouldn't be there. The problem is that time and time again, very smart and true observations are sprinkled in. The rise of the internet and how social media is shaping our social lives, perceptions, and morals.
Over the past few years, many, including some of the very optimists who helped design the internet as we know it today, have been outspoken in saying that social media has corrupted the dream of what the internet could do for the world.
That there is a disturbing movement of moral superiority and that it seems almost impossible to have a discourse on difficult topics. But then we jump right back to absolutely crazy conclusions that if you don't think about them can seem frighteningly plausible.
There was a culture that was encouraged on Tumblr, which was to be able to describe your unique, non-normative self. But it was taken to such an extreme that people began to describe this as the snowflake, the person who constructs a totally kind of boutique and unique identity for themselves, and then guards that identity in a very, very sensitive way and reacts in an enraged way when anyone does not respect the uniqueness of their identity.
One thing is clear, the internet is the villain in this version of the story.
It's holding up a mirror to society. But what it's really doing is it's an amplifier for the worst parts of us.
And because the internet isn't a human being, it's so easy for them to fight against this phantom that they themselves perceive as nothing more than an amoral authoritarian mob.
And so that's really where you get cancel culture in a sense.
Getting canceled isn't a big deal to JKR either. Apparently, it's the new fashionable hobby.
I was watching it happening to other artists. I was watching it happening to other sort of properties, creative properties, and it was inevitable. I was going to be hit with it too. Was it enjoyable? No. Did I take it really personally? No.
People online did discover that there is a kind of clout to be gained from discovering what is problematic about a popular figure. So there used to be a Tumblr blog called Your Fave is Problematic.
Yeah, there are people who piss on others to elevate themselves. Yes, there was Your Fave is Problematic, but why is that being mentioned here? That's right, for the framing. To downplay what JKR is accused of. Everything is just baseless and not worth paying attention to. Just a bunch of internet weirdos.
I have to tell you, a ton of Potter fans were still with me.
And while we're on the subject of elevating oneself, that's also part of framing. Demeaning opponents, elevating JK. That's why the podcast spends the first 2 episodes emphasizing her biography and positive influence.
If you don't know it, your children almost certainly do.
It was everywhere.
Harry Potter is an old-fashioned, good triumphs over evil story, but full of quirks and surprises.
And then reminding us of the book bans and the accusations of heresy made by Orthodox Christians and the hate mob of right-wing extremists that arose when JK spoke out in favor of a black Hermione in the play. Like, hello, she can't be intolerant and right-wing because the real Nazis are the trans extremists. They're burning Harry Potter books right now. At the same time, it's framed as if there have been large-scale book burnings rather than a viral, isolated incident that referred to queer books being removed from libraries and then attracted a few followers. You can see the direction in which listeners are being steered, similar to the TERF example.
I'm gonna ask, what story are you trying to tell with this fact? What political goal are you trying to support?
Perhaps it would be helpful to break down the individual episodes in general in order to show you what role each one plays in this retelling. Episode 1, the one through which we also emphasize with JK, aka the tragic backstory. Episode 2, the one where we show that she can't be narrow-minded and right-wing because she used to be hated by them. Those two were released together and already revealed the exact way things were going to go. I call them the rebranding episodes. Episode 3, the internet has turned our kids into super woke cancel clouds and dragon people. Here we are presented with the true villain and an explanation of where the snowflake trans people come from who now want to destroy JK, the breach called the Big Bad Internet. Episode 4, TERF is short for nice women's rights activists who fight against aggressive men in disguise, rightly so. You should understand why it's important to fight against trans activists and become loud because they are authoritarian, even if you actually need to have authority to do that, which is difficult as a small oppressed group, but whatever you say, Megan and Joanne.
It is authoritarianism.
In episode 5, we put JK's tweets into perspective. She clarifies once again what she actually meant, even if she didn't write it. She's always been good at that, #GayDumbledore. Episode 6 says, I can't be transphobic, here are my alibi allies. Too bad when they distance themselves, though. They want to pretend they're looking at both sides, but instead, they manipulate, for example, continuously how we take statements from ContraPoints by repeatedly inserting parts from her 1.5-hour YouTube video in order to support JK's position.
We saw ourselves like the biblical prophets, warning people that they needed to obey God, or else suffer his curses in this life and hell in the next. And we proudly defended our views.
And a lot of trans people have been very horribly treated by men, by TERFs, by strangers on the street, by their own families. And for some of those trans people, canceling celebrities on Twitter is the one kind of power they have.
Oh, and there's also an interview with Noah, a 17-year-old trans boy who is not only a JK fan, but is also a fan of Megan Phelps Roper herself. Are you fucking kidding me?
It's exciting to meet you because part of my whole gender journey was, finding resources on the internet. And I watched every TED Talk about every remotely queer subject that there was. So I saw yours more than once. I watched it and I appreciate that it was sort of a resource for developing critical thinking.
And then Megan, who has managed to free herself from criticism from the homophobic church, ends with the biggest clickbait imaginable.
I wanted to give her the chance to answer some of the hard questions posed by her critics, to hear what she makes of them, and to ask her, essentially, the same question I am always asking myself. What if you're wrong?
Leaving us wondering, was all the framing just there to mislead us and now comes the big plot twist? Is JKR second-guessing herself? What if she's wrong?
Why? Why are you doing this? Why can't you just let people be who they are and support them the way that you do for these outsider characters in your book? If one of those people is listening right now, how would you talk to them? What would you say to them?
And then to find out in episode 7 that they're turning the whole thing around so that the conclusion of the podcast is, it's not JKR who is asking herself whether she could be wrong, it's the trans movement who is gonna wake up one day and realize that they were wrong and then will have to live with it.
I would say to them, you, as a human being, the self that you are, I have the utmost respect for you. I want you protected, I want you safe. I would treat you with respect, always. And I would say, I'm worried. I'm worried that you, yourself, may have got caught up in something that may ultimately harm you, and that we may be living through a cultural moment that we will look back on, not with pride, but with puzzlement that we let it happen.
That's what we've been working on for 7 hours? A narrative designed to prove that JKR was right all along and has sympathy for all misguided trans activists who are fighting on the wrong side of history? That trans people are the bad guys?
Is this all moving pieces on a chessboard for you? Is it all a game? Does real world hurt and harm not count at all?
And then at the end, Megan asks a series of questions that helped her make sure she would never stray from the right path again, as she did back then in her cult church.
I was like, how can I ever trust my own mind again? Because I was so certain. So these are the questions that I ask myself to see, like, am I starting to go down a bad path?
And then let's JK answer all the questions for us so that we as listeners know exactly this is the woman who is on the right side of history. And that Megan classifies it that way is not ignorance or curiosity, but the logical conclusion from the entire narrative that has been built up over 7 episodes. At the end of the interview, Megan asked if I had any advice about the project. I said that the one thing she definitely should not do is frame the conflict as a debate between 2 equally legitimate sides. Trans people versus transphobes both have some good points. It's now clear that this is exactly what she's done. From Megan's perspective, this story makes perfect sense because she was in JK's position and believes in redemption.
My heretical belief is that even the people who seem to be the worst, most destructive people in the world are human beings who deserve compassion and empathy if we want to find a way to change their minds.
But how much damage should we accept from destructive people who are in positions of power, Megan, when real-life suffering is being caused? I'm not going to go into every single attempt by Rowling to refute the arguments of her critics because that's not the focus of my video. And to be honest, most of the reasons are so far-fetched and sometimes absurd.
You are essentially saying, I'll treat you as a woman, but this distinction that you are emphasizing, the biological distinction that you see as being so important, it can feel hurtful to them. Like they are, almost a thing, but not quite. Can you understand the pain that that could cause?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, I can understand that hurt. The thing is...
She just doesn't care because...
Women are the only group, to my knowledge, that are being asked to embrace members of their oppressor class.
JK's same old untransitioned trans women or men bullshit, yes.
We are in a cultural moment where that individual's hurt is being prioritized over the hurt of women whose rights and boundaries are under sustained assault. And I think it's interesting to ask why the pain of one group is being prioritized over the pain of other groups.
Because in a parliamentarian democracy, minority protection is a thing, and we have to protect the interests and lives of smaller groups. Trans women are not the oppressor class of cis women, Joanne. But as I said, I don't need to debunk this nonsense, others are better at that. My main job is storytelling, and the purpose of this video was to show you how the free press uses storytelling techniques and manipulation to mislead you with the cover of trustworthiness and objectivity, and serve you a carefully crafted story with a clear message. Or in ContraPoint's words,
the fact on its own doesn't mean very much.
The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling is a feel-good product for queer and transphobic people, as well as conservatives and non-progressives who have no interest in engaging with the issue of gender because it gives them permission to carry on exactly as they have done and thus ignore or even increase the suffering of trans people.
Bigotry is not just the psychological state of hating a group of people. Bigotry is political. It's a reaction to changing demographics, or to liberation movements, or to changing power relations between groups.
To do this, they use right-wing rhetoric that we know from conspiracy circles and the alternative right-wing movement, which is specifically designed to appeal to you, a variation of the lying press conspiracy which promises instant trust.
We live in a moment when free speech, the bedrock of our democracy and of all free societies, is often viewed as suspect, where many argue that the right to free speech is too dangerous, and that even listening to ideological opponents is morally wrong.
Legit, no one thinks that. The narrative is just often used to legitimize hate speech, contempt of humanity, and incitement of the people. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Media literacy is key. And if someone tells you, trust me, bro, I'm objective and I'm gonna tell you how the real world works, start investigating right away. Because you are in for a whole lot of bullshit.
The free press is trying to help restore trust in journalism. Restore trust in historic.
If you want to support queer artists and stories, make sure to check out the Kickstarter for my new animation project, Suckers. It's about a group of queer vampires who kick conservative shitheads like Rowling in the ass to save the world. Until next time, chew-wah!